Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and once again tonight I am joined by Sai.
This is Sai, and I am once again tonight joining Lucid.
And this is, I believe, the first time where you will see in the bottom right corner of the screen little turn finished or unfinished icons. And that is because we have finally caught up and we are live with the current turn in the game. Not, of course, when you're watching this, but for Sai and I, it's like a little miniature accomplishment. We've been recording most weeknights to get here. So, golf clap for us.
Yeah, we started with a fair bit of a backlog, and yeah, we've been doing a couple turns a night, and now we are completely caught up with live turns.
And it's a pretty interesting time in the game. We've got lots of things in flux and some big wars starting. Particularly, we've got Vanheim and Vanheim and Pangea gonna be fighting soon. And the Erythia Tien Chi conflicts are going to be starting as well. They started a little bit last turn, but it was just some light raiding from Tien Chi.
Right. TNT having the slight upper hand because Erythea's armies had just finished conquering Atlantis, whereas TNT's stuff was already in position, so they were able to get the initial raiding advantage and push along the border even into Erythea's cap circle.
Yeah. So let's go to a message from Pythium. Me again. So Agartha did not contest our move onto his cap or southern fort. Feels like he's getting ready for a last stand. The south fort with all those umbrals, that will be rough. We waited a turn to bring up more mages, and now we'll sit on the fort. We have a number of death mages and a lot of solid troops, so hopefully we'll be good. With foul vapor sniping mages should be fine. Elsewhere, all of our heretics are moving into Agartha's land. Let's see if it's possible to eliminate his dominion.
Yeah, so the heretic thing is really nice for that little cleanup phase where you're getting everything back under your dominion, but it's not necessarily worth it in Agartha, just because Agartha scales are incredible. You want to keep Agartha scales. So, well,
Well,
naturally,
I mean, he could actually potentially do the perfect thing, which is he keeps his own dominion from moving in with heretics, and he heretics out all of Agartha's dominion,
right, but
leaving perfect scales.
When Agartha dies, that already happens.
Right. But if you don't have
I guess the
heretics in
heretic's helpful
place,
there.
they
Yeah.
will the other people's dominion will come in.
Yeah, that's
But
fair. Yeah, so the heretics can help keep stuff from creeping in. But the only like downside I would see to even that methodology is Pythium's heretics are the research mages.
right, right. Well, maybe he will finally put down some foreign labs and
Yeah,
station
yeah.
some heretics and some
I
strategic
do
points.
like yeah, I do like the idea of setting up your heretic lab places along your borders when you're conquering a place like this, where the scales are sublime and you want to keep them as they are.
Right. I have another message from Pythium. Elsewhere, the world is settling into a number of different wars. Gath fights Arco. Arco fights Gath and Jomon. Marignon fights Gath and Pangea. Vanheim fights Pangea. Tienchi fights Erythia. Utgard and Zabalba remain free agents, as I understand, though maybe Zabalba will attack Erythia.
Yeah, that's what we're reading too.
If we can stay out. Oh no, we were thinking Zabalba will attack Arco.
No, but Tien Chi had messaged us regarding Shabalba being open to the
Oh,
idea of
right, right,
fighting
right.
Erythia.
That's true. If we can stay out of wars, we can tech up, finish our forts, and readjust our infrastructure. We have a problem that a lot of our labs ended up with zero resources, or end up with zero resources if we put down forts in high income provinces. So a bit of work to reassess and decide the best approach is required. Word on the street is that Erythia has 2 6s in their research. That's two more than us.
Yeah, we know that they have Conjuration 6, and I can definitely imagine that they would have Arrowfend by now as well.
Right. We're moving in on the last Atlantis territory this turn, the lake, and if we do end up delivering the coup de grace on Agartha, this will mean we have delivered the killing blow to 3 nations. Can you remember all three?
I believe they got so they're getting the killing blow on Atlantis now. Before this, did they get a killing blow on the Midgard? That's the only one I can think of.
I mean, not really. Midgard maybe.
Midgard kind of got the killing blow on themselves by
Right.
moving out, but if they
Right.
took the last Midgard
They
province,
might
then
have.
that
Yeah.
would have been number 3.
Yeah. That might be it. Yeah. I'll go with that. That makes sense. Let's take a look at their research real quick compared to Erythia. Oh, wait. Whoops. Research.
Yeah, they're not in the same ballgame.
And then Pythium. Oh, man. This is really low research for Pythium. Pythium
Pythium
should
is
be
supposed
really high.
Pythium should be the research leader in most games that they're in, yeah.
Yeah. They don't have as efficient. Well, maybe they do. I mean, Ducados are really good, but this is really
So
low research.
yeah, so the thing with the Ducados is that they're individually very good, but Pythium can get Misties out of fort labs
Right.
because they're one commander point.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like a question
Quality,
of like,
quantity thing.
yeah, because like per infrastructure cost, Pythium theoretically wins, but in practice, Pythium needs forts too, and
Right.
you know they also want their Renatai to actually be their battle mages, not
Right.
these like, you know, 40.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
nature ones are
admittedly,
great, but they do run out of steam.
yeah, like in Magic 3, that's 8 research per lab per turn, which is, you know, amazing, right? Given that you're only paying for lab. But Erythia's Deducados at 15 research, and you get 1.5 per citadel, like in terms of density, they do keep up.
Right.
In terms of like literally just gold investment, like if that's the only thing that you're tracking, and you assume infinite land, then Pythium does win.
Yeah.
But in practice, you don't get that, right?
Right.
You still need to buy forts, you still need to buy troops, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, message from Tien Chi. I'm starting to think we're too late to the Erythia war. Erythia has something like double my research on display, true, and has the capability at least to counter my key battlefield magic, which I think he's thinking right now is rigor. So this must mean he's thinking that Erythia has relief.
Right. And Erythia also has some reinvigoration on their mages, I believe, because they took the Earth for Merm.
Mm-hmm.
So while their troops would definitely fall behind, and a communion setup that like kind of relies on being, you know, at a certain fatigue balance could definitely get damaged by rigor mortis. Erythia is by no means like crippled or
Right.
like they don't have they're not in a situation where they have no way to play around it.
He did take reinvigoration on the Myrmicillion.
I believe so. I know that
Okay.
they took attack.
Okay, well, let's look. I can't remember. I offered him
Yeah,
a peace deal that included teaming up on globals, leveraging my forging capability, and his research. He said no, so we marched to war. I hope to kill the pretender this turn and not get totally wrecked by his next army wipe trap.
So when someone declares war on you and then says, "Oh, actually, I think that you're too strong and that we should make peace," that's kind of telling you that they don't think that they can beat you. So if anything, that's like a motivation to continue prosecuting the war.
Yeah, sort of. I don't think I wouldn't jump to that conclusion in the sense that for me, I'm only going to like if I declare war on you, I think I'm going to either I have to because the game's going to end if I don't, or I think it's going to be a very profitable war for me. So I will offer peace not just because I don't think you'll win it. I'll offer peace just because I think it might be too expensive for me to win. I've done that like a ton of times. Where like I'm in a war, but I know it's going to be grindy to finish, and I would rather just let you live and have all your shit. But
Yeah, it's just from Erythia's perspective, I could see someone that declared war on you subsequently offering peace with no real losses or battles. I could see that as them realizing that you have the advantage. Especially, you know, since as Erythia, you should know that you do have the advantage. Given that at the start of the war, he probably cast that scrying spell on Tienchi's capital in order to compare their graphs.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it does say, I guess what I want to say to this is the fact that Tienchi offered him peace, I don't think should be interpreted by Erythia as, oh, well, that means I'm clearly going to win this war. What I think does matter here is that Erythia said no. And what that means to me is that Erythia thinks not only can I defend myself, but I think I can conquer you. And hopefully he's not making that assessment just on the fact that Tienchi offered peace. Hopefully he's making that assessment off of, you know, scrying Tienchi's capital, looking at their score graphs and being like, I got this.
Yeah, I just don't tend to think of those peace offerings as being particularly convincing unless like there have already been battles.
Yeah, the problem, I mean, I've done it to multiple players where I realize reasonably early that like, hey, this is not going to be the kind of clean win I wanted it to be. Let's peace out, and they persecute the war to the end, which is almost always their own destruction. And it's like we could have had peace, and they're like, well, you know. So
yeah, it very much depends on the offer and the situation, but
right.
I'm the reason that I was saying that is more just that They're coming up with this offer without having battles yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And that's very telling to me.
Well, they've had, yeah, I mean, you sometimes don't need the battle. Sometimes just scouting what research somebody has is enough to be like, okay, I'm not going to win this cleanly. But, Erythia clearly thinks they're going to win. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see what exactly Erythia is casting, because they have so many different options that we don't even know yet what their army setup is going to be like.
Right. And I mean, Tien Chi hasn't found, I was just saying they had scouted some of the Erythia research, but they haven't scouted much of it. Erythia is basically still holding all the cards in his hand with very little intel revealed except Conjuration 6, which is not much. So.
This is a fun message.
Okay, we've got a message from Pangea here. Here we were, just minding our own, and of course Marignon's business, enjoying the LA Pangean lifestyle. You know the stuff, trying to seduce horny F1B1s, raiding with the hottest satyrs near you, recruiting 13 oiled up centaurs per turn. Dare I say we were even ogling Tien Chi's splendid posterior, and dreaming of doing unspeakable things to him. Speaking of taking taking Midgard's X cap and a throne. But no, our sneaky neighbor had to ruin all of that fun. Lustful times are canceled. So that's interesting. He was not going to be content. These are aggressive players. I like it.
The other thing that we actually hadn't thought to mention is that Pangea actually gets a lot of value out of seducing Marignon's mages, because those are blood mages. And we'd mentioned before, or I had mentioned before when talking about the Throne of Order, Pangea loves having a trickle of blood income.
Right.
Because that's just like boosters for them. So they actually get a lot of value out of being able to seduce even a relatively small number of Marignon's mages.
Yeah, that's a good point. But to me, the interesting thing is they were thinking already about attacking Tien Chi. I'm not. I mean, these guys are aggressive. They're more aggressive than me by a good margin. I mean, you're a very aggressive player too, so.
Yeah, I think Tien Chi also makes sense as a follow-up just because of the convenience of going after Midgard. I don't know if that's who I would have picked, but I would have,
Yeah.
I think it does make sense to consider a next war. And I also kind of agree with him that, like, Vanheim is not who you're looking at.
Oh, definitely not.
Because it's a relatively hard war, and even if you, like, even if it's, like, on your terms and you finished with your Marignon excursion and all that good stuff, it's still, like, in terms of, like, value that you get out of it for how much you have to put in to win, really not what you want your next target to be.
Right. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting and why maybe being more aggressive is favored in this situation in the game is that there are other more aggressive players. So in some ways, like, the game pace is often defined by the most aggressive, like, skilled player. So, like, if you have somebody who's aggressive but they suck or they don't, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But if you have, like, a really skilled player who's really aggressive, it'll, like, set the pacing for the game. So part of it, if they're sitting there on, like, 1.5 caps or maybe even 2 caps or maybe 2.5, but somebody else is sitting on there on, like, 3, like Arco, or, like, if Tien Chi runs over Erythia, like, you get behind. So, people are not sitting on their laurels, which means you kind of have to do stuff to keep up or knock down whoever's running ahead.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
All right, Vanheim is attacking us, and Arco is attacking Gath. Well played. We didn't expect it, even if we didn't trust the goblins. First orders are on turn 32, with battles to come on turn 33. Well, that's not very far for us. That's only 2 turns from now.
Next turn, I believe.
Oh, we are on 32. So yeah. Our god is up. So that's something. It's a S7D6, Idol of Sorcery. Still needs some research to teleport him on top of an army, though. So stay tuned.
We'd seen that, actually, from the Bless. We knew that this was going to be an Idol of Sorcery.
Right. So that's exciting.
Yeah, the fun thing to me with that is that's bone grinding with no boosters.
Right. What did he have? D6. Yeah, you can do that. Especially if you do Power of the Spheres first.
Right. Well, bone. You don't need it though. Bone grinding is D7 1 gem.
Right.
So yeah, you can just
only
cast
it once if you have it like that. So, but that might be all you need. And bone grinding by itself, one single cast of bone grinding doesn't normally do that much.
Well, that's actually the advantage in my mind is that because you don't need Power of the Spears, the enemy doesn't get their first rounds of buffs off. Like you bone grind, and it's what's the word? the innate caster.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
teleport in, bone grind, you can do like bone grinding returning, or just bone grinding soul vortex or bone grinding soul, like, whatever you want to do, you can fire off that bone grinding before any buffs go up, which is something you can't do if you have only D5.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. That is an option. Even 2 bone grindings a lot of times won't kill human troops. A lot of times you need 3. So I don't know. I mean, I think ideal use cases, they're not casting Fog Warriors, which is the bone grinding counter. And you get to do Power of the Spheres and then 3 bone grindings. And if they don't put up Fog Warriors, then the whole army's dead. But yeah, I mean, you could do it in a lot of ways. And it might be, it might be you don't even need to do Power of the Spheres if you load up enough death gems. I don't know how many gems will it use. It's only 1 death gem to cast, but it's death
Yeah.
6. How many gems will it use to reduce
Death
fatigue?
7.
Oh, it's death 7?
Yeah. So I don't actually know, but it does. I know that it depends on what else you have scripted.
Yeah.
So if you have a sequence of bone grindings, it will use more death gems for the first casting because it knows that it's going to need to cast more 100 fatigue spells afterwards.
Okay, I'm actually going to fire up a test game real quick because it'll be kind of fun to see. And this is going to be really relevant. So see you guys in 1 second. All right, folks, we are back. And I am teleporting somebody on top of...
Yeah, so I'm reasonably confident that it's going to use enough gems in order to let it cast all of the bone grindings.
So it's cast it once, and it only used 26 fatigue. Okay, so this actually is sick.
Yeah, so it should work.
Yeah, I didn't know how many gems it would use, but yeah. And then this 4th one is when you really get them. Yeah. They've routed, so it stopped using gems. I think it was 4, and we had 5 scripted. So, yeah, it didn't even fatigue out. So, God, that's so powerful.
Yeah, I think that's why they took Death 6.
Yeah. All right, going back to the game. All right, and we are back. So, yeah, so that message was from Pangea. They're talking about their idol of sorcery. And yeah.
And Alt 7 for bone grinding is also really nice for fog warriors and like just big alteration stuff in general, which Pangea also gets a lot of value from. So unlike evocation for, wailing winds, you actually get a lot of value on the build up to it.
Right.
And like from having that very high path. Like it's not just this one spell.
Right. Yeah, Alt 7 is like a huge breakpoint for a lot of different armies. So
Marble Warriors, that was the other big one.
Yeah. So that's going to be really cool. And Vanheim is also, I believe, going to tell us about their Idol of Sorcery, which is coming online. So we're going to have like a very phallic duel between Pangea and Vanheim with their Idols of Sorcery. First, a message from Gath. So even if resource-wise it's a win, Marignon spent about 75 gems in that fight and definitely lost stuff in the retreat. Overall, it was a defeat that sets me back and makes war with Arco very hard. And of course, he's referring to this play he made with 2 super combatants where he was trying to basically turn timer the army and cut off the retreat route.
Right. And the thing that went wrong was turn timering, or was cutting the retreat, because he did actually get most of Marignon's army to retreat. And if the cut had been successful, even if there was that one crippled crossbowman left on his fort, he would have been more or less completely dominant in his war against Marignon because he would have wiped out the army.
Right. It was slightly unlucky because if my Abba on the fort had lived another turn, I would have likely won, right? Because he would have cast Body Ethereal. But he didn't because they were imps, so it wasn't really lucky. It was just good play by Marignon.
Right, to bring all those mages that countered it.
Right. And lifelong protections. So, also, I wish I could have won. Oh, also, I could have won if my shield was not Vine, which is probably never a correct choice for a Gadol. Also, lost my
It would have helped. I don't know if it would have helped enough. But Shield of Gleaming Gold definitely would have been better for the higher parry value.
Yeah. I also lost my Underwater Cube Squad, which I was greedily sneaking through his fort. Huh,
we missed that. Yeah.
Maybe we go back and look at it. Thus, I had to buy Arco off with the throne and a forest province nearby, which is painful, but probably a correct decision for now. We'll return to that matter later, hopefully. So now I will focus on Marignon again. Gadol usage is probably not an option anymore, as I only have a single Earth 2 left, and he counters them now pretty well with lifelong protection, requiring me to use, and lose, mages extensively. Right, because the time he was successful using the Gadol hardly ever got to buff himself, because the imps were on him immediately. We saw him cast like Temper Flesh on turn 60 or something as he was trying to get through his script.
Right, because he doesn't have combat caster, and he's in melee the whole fight.
Right.
Yeah.
But he still won that fight because he sacrificed like 6 mages to sit there and get 1 turn of fluffing off before all the imps landed. So obviously that's an expensive way to kind of roll. I have enchantment 6, and also the guy now know like Marignon's going to have like anti-Godal plans before, even better than he did now, presumably. So you want to be careful doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. And Marignon absolutely, as a nation, can field counters that mess those guys up.
Right. I have enchantment 6 this turn myself, and so depending on what his actions are now, I should now be able to take a more fair fight. It will be ideal if he moves on top of my castle again, but I doubt he will. P.S. My heroic Godal, who is top 1 in the Hall of Fame, is obese, shrunken, and has never healing wound and a curse. All of this results in a total of 43 HP.
Poor lad. All the other Godals make fun of him for being short and fat.
Exactly. That's so funny. Has less than he started with.
And now he's also susceptible to being squished.
That's true. Yeah. I think you can fix that with enlarge, but wait, no, are they size 5 to start with?
Yeah, so they're size 5 base, and he had been using enlarge, which makes them immune to air elementals.
But that's
with
not
their
possible.
size 4, exactly, yeah.
Right.
Now that he's size 4, he can't be enlarged out of trample range.
That's hilarious. I love that. And now we have a message from Vanheim. Hand got their god much earlier than average. It's an S7 D6 idol of sorcery. We have one too, but it's an Air 4 S5 D6. So more versatile, but will lose to Magic Duel. True.
Well, he means specifically this Magic Duel because it's a 7 versus 6 roll.
Right, but this one is actually at the threshold where it's kind of vulnerable to Magic Duel in general. And S7 is kind of at the threshold where it's mostly immune to most casual Magic Duels.
Right, you need an S2 or above mage, and even then it needs a perfect roll to win.
Right. So against the Vanheim Cursed Idol, it's probably a good idea if you have recruitable anywhere Astral Mages and you think this thing may be dropping on you to just script Magic Duel at least 4 or 5 times every fight.
Well, sometimes. Yes.
Yeah, sometimes, but I mean, these things are
for
nasty
a big doom stack, yes.
Yeah, for a big doom stack. Yeah, not for casually everything, but stuff where you'd be really, really sad if they sent the Idol of Sorcery. Critically, Bone Grinding is a brick wall against any large stack we use. And Pangea...
It's worth mentioning, actually, like very specifically this. So because Idols of Sorcery have innate caster, they cast at 100% cast speed. I know that you know this, but we're like explaining to the viewers. They can actually cast with equal cast chance as to like who goes first against even regular 1-round buff spells, whereas usually you can't. And Vanheim is particularly susceptible to this because their mages have lower than human hit points. So whereas most people aren't like super worried about that round 1 bone grinding messing them up, Vanheim can die to 1 cast, and they have a much higher chance of being completely interrupted. So that means that spamming bone grinding, which as we just saw does work, can completely cripple a Vanheim point buff rating stack because they will literally never get their spells off.
Yeah. The other thing too, and a slight correction there, is while it is in theory like a 100% cast time, how it actually works in the back end isn't quite like that for the first turn.
It's 50%, yeah.
No, it's not. It's actually the way innates are coded for the very first spell.
Do they auto lose?
No, they auto win. So they're going to beat 100% cast times, I believe. I mean, we can test it. There's some randomness, but it's actually based on the unit ID. So if you actually open up the debug log and look at like the game when it's running with whatever unit you want to look at, you can see what the unit ID is, and then I think you divide it by 13 or something, and that will tell you what turn tick it's going to go on. I forget the exact math.
I thought that there was RNG as to like a range outside of the 100% in which they hit. So half of them will cast before and half
but not this. With innate, it's actually hard coded when they're going to cast, and it's usually before any of the 100%. So that's one of the reasons why Nazca is broken, because the innate casters they get, not even the Royal Malakwi, all the innate casters are going to go turn 1 before other mages. So it's kind of nuts. And
I didn't
some
know
of my
that
math could be not 100% right, but it's something like that.
Well, yeah, I know that the Royals cast first just because they have they have innate too.
Yeah.
So they cast like before anyone.
Yeah. And see, that's actually not true, because the way the very first thing gets happened. So this is how we actually noticed, because I was sitting around playing with it, and I would notice sometimes my like my whatchamacallit,
The
what's
regular Malkies?
the regular
Malky
Malekiths would go
priests?
before the divine couple or whatever it is.
The Malky priest, yeah.
The one that's
Oh,
innate 3. What are they called again? The
the,
royal
the royal
couple.
couple.
The royal
Yeah.
couple. So sometimes my innate caster 1s would go before the innate caster 3s, and I was like, how is this? And so Loggy and I got looking at it, and we found out that it's actually hard coded based on the unit ID. So kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's not how it says it works, but
No,
that's
not.
very
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty. I haven't. We're advertising now. I haven't really shared it with people in general. Like Loggy and I kept it hush hush for a while because it's kind of abusable. But yeah.
Yeah, because you can look up what your unit IDs are in your local debug output.
Right.
So you can see like very specifically when your innate caster is going to cast first.
Right. Which actually is interesting and relevant in this matchup of Idols of Sorcery, because like let's say this Idol of Sorcery, the S7, wanted to jump on the S5. If the S5 went first, it would 100% of the time be able to escape with returning. But if this one went first, it would 100% of the time be able to magic duel first. So kind of cool.
Yeah. That is weird.
Yeah. But yeah.
Anyways, to go back to the thing of the brick wall, bone grinding is generally a hard counter to Vanheim, and from what Lucid had just shared, the way the mechanics work actually favor the bone grinding caster even more.
Right. So that the good thing about Vanheim is they can stealth their whole army. So they're like, here, okay, well, I'm going to jump an Idol of Sorcery on you, and, you know, they get to like just disappear and go somewhere else. And
right, but outside of fighting on forts, you can't ever like guarantee, you know, where a battle's going to take place, right? Like sometimes you do have to fight.
What do you mean? Like, how can you make
Like,
ones fight? They could just stealth.
What I mean is like that there are places where you actually need to take a fight. Like if you're under siege, right?
Oh, right.
And you need to go defend that.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
there are absolutely positions where you have to be able to take a death ball fight.
But
like on, you know.
But the mono, like the Idol of Sorcery won't be able to storm. So if you're fighting inside your fort, you're safe.
Yeah. So I think so he actually mentions this here, is that when he besieges a Pangea fort, the idol can't interrupt that, right? Because it will teleport inside the fort.
Right.
And along those lines, if he's defending his own fort, it's only when he has to fight outside of it that it actually can, pose a counter.
Yeah. And he doesn't really have... We'll have to think of what are the solutions to this Idol of Sorcery. Like, I don't think flying units will get across the field before bone grinding goes. It may be enough, though, that... Because the first bone grinding, even for goblins, probably isn't going to kill many. It's really the second or third that's going to do it. So it's possible like a stack of devils or fiends of darkness or something that are just going to turn one, jump across, is going to work for this one. With Vanheim, though, they can't magic duel. This is too high for them to magic duel. So, or for it to be a good option.
Yeah, I was thinking about like Dusk Dagger stuff, but you don't have great folks to carry it outside of your blood summons.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. The other option potentially is trying to hit it with like a Black Bow of Beowulf and just try to feeble mind.
Well, that has to deal damage to feeble mind it.
But they don't have a super high protection. What is it? Let me see. Okay, so we went and looked it up, and yeah, the Idol of Sorcery's got 20 protection. So you might be able to do it with the bow, but you would need like precision, and you would probably need a lot of bonus strength to get it over the threshold because it's not armor piercing; it's only piercing.
Yeah, and you would basically need to have the sort of super combatant or like, you know, heavy thug chassis that can actually just outright kill it with a Dusk Dagger.
Right, that's another option. But like Vanheim's saying, this is going to be a really tough threat for them to deal with. But fortunately, they have stealth. That's like the big thing. Theirs is also going to be very hard for Pangea to deal with, except theirs can be magic dueled, and Pangea has cheap Astral 1 mages. But Pangea cannot stealth in the same way that Vanheim can, and this guy can do like Wrathful Skies and shit, which is pretty spooky.
Yeah, Pangea's big upside is basically that their guys are sturdier. Like the Centaur mages just come with a bunch of hit points to begin with.
Right.
So they just don't get like instantly cleared quite as well as the Vedi do. And because their guys also have higher base strength, it's a little bit easier to make someone thugly enough to just go smack it.
Right. So yeah, versus Pangea, you wouldn't use bone grinding. You would instead do Wrathful Skies.
Wrathful Skies, Wailing Winds,
right,
Wind of Death.
Yeah, Wind of Death would also be really good. Though I think Pangea stuff lives a reasonably long time. And we're not probably at the point in the game where they would have mass regen, but like once Pangea does mass regen, I don't think they really care that much about Wind of Death.
I mean, yeah, and they've got recuperation.
Right.
Like Pangea has so many just like minor things on those heavy stages that, you know, between that and they're just like higher hit points, they're very comfy against a lot of battlefield clear stuff.
Yeah, like this doesn't seem like a big difference. This might, yeah, 50 divided 10. Yeah, if they
Well, the sages are older.
okay.
The sages are the guys that we care about
Let's
as a
take a look at the
Pangean.
sage.
Yeah, they start at
A
50.
little older. This is probably enough where you, if as long as you send him back home after the Wind of Death right away, so the battle doesn't last a long time, because that'll determine how many decay ticks you get. They'll probably survive a Wind of Death, but yeah,
They also have decent MR.
right. That's a good point. So then, and if they do turn one anti magic, it would still happen after Wind of Death, but
It would be good against Wind of Death spam at least.
right. But they have pretty high base MR too. So, like you're saying, let's finish the Vanheim message and then start looking at some battles.
Yeah.
Okay, so they could conceivably have bone grinding up soon. We're limited to raiding and operations on top of enemy forts until we get some counters online. That's fine.
That's what we didn't talk about with the stealth, yeah.
Right. That's fine since Vanheim likes to play that game, and we're trying to be deliberate about patrolling out scouts. But we are holding some troops in stealth reserve, not sure how to best use them now that we're vulnerable to such strong asymmetric counters. Not sure if Pan would be so bold as to teleport bone grinding returning onto one of our blood hunting provinces, but we have to be aware of the possibility.
Yeah, usually if you're doing the teleport grinding thing, you're trying to aim for an army.
Right.
So a mere blood hunting province is perhaps a little too low value to shoot for, but you could definitely still do some damage.
Yeah, I mean, if they put like 8 or 10 blood slaves, maybe blood hunters, maybe you would go for it, but that's not the kind of thing you're trying to hit.
Yeah, because your god turns are valuable when your god is this big hammer.
Right. And it's pretty easy for Veti to do some trivial things like to get the god cursed, you know, by having somebody doing spirit curse or something, which is just annoying when, you know, you want to, like, they want to be using these gods for a long time, right? So you don't want to be sending it everywhere, especially when it's going to get cursed and then get afflictions, because eventually if you get like a really bad feeble mind or mute affliction, you're going to be really sad.
We talked about how low impact horror marking was when we were talking about the Atlantis god situation, but this is actually the sort of god where stacking up the horror marks might be worthwhile if you can actually get them high enough. But that requires that you get it up to the hundreds.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I especially against a strong, relevant player with a really powerful god like these, it probably makes sense. And I do have a feel like Doomhars, I don't think there's much you can do to prevent a Doomhar from killing an Idol of Sorcery. You know, you can't put gear slots in it. You can't stack defense. It's going to jump back there and do like 80 armor negating damage a turn. So, or more.
Yeah, and you can't even script against those because they're assassination battles.
Right. Okay, so that's that. And then the final message from them, we heard rumors of a 7th mythical gem type that along with air, water, fire, astral, death, and nature, there are also earth gems. We got one from an event this turn, and lured by access to new magic, we found Erythia is going to trade us some in exchange for fire and gear for their ant god. Oh, I wonder what they're making him.
Yeah.
We'll have to find out. So now with the battles.
Soon, yeah.
So first we have a magic phase attack from Tien Chi, and Tien Chi is going on top of the Erythian god, as I thought he would. And he is bringing this hero, Panlong, the Dragon of Rain.
He's kind of nice. I like that he's a freezing mistcaster.
Yeah. And I think he's going to be an air elemental caster here. And so is this guy. So
and that guy's twice 4 and 2, I believe.
Oh, yeah. So if he dies, no big deal. This guy he does not want to lose, though. So I wonder if he scripts him to retreat or something. This play was anticipated by Erythia, and this guy is running off the field.
He boldly ran away.
Right. He's saying, I'm going to put my pretender out here, and I know you're going to go after it, and you're going to spend 12 air gems just so that I can retreat. So, Actually, economically comes out pretty strongly in favor of Erythia here. Just made him waste 15 gems.
Well, okay, so it's 2 Excaliburs, and they each cast just once, I believe.
Did they only get once? I thought they had more. Let's see.
I think they each only got 1 cast off because it's running away, right? It's going to rout the army.
Okay. 1. Oh, this guy doesn't even do it.
He did Raise Dead.
This guy did twice. Ends up with 3 gems. What did we have at the start? Not that this matters, but we're looking for. So this guy cast 6 gems. He did 3 gems per cast and cast it twice. So it's 6, so it's 10 gems total.
Yeah.
Not 15. Okay. I wonder if he did the switcheroo. What would have been really clever if he baited the god to get him to magic phase stuff in, and then sent us like a medium or small army here to try to kill the raiders in the magic and the normal phase.
Yeah, I expect that he didn't. And part of the reason is that sending in stuff that kills air elementals is actually quite expensive.
Yeah.
Like later on in the game, that becomes, very accessible when you've got like enlarged golems and stuff.
Right.
But right now, I don't think Erythia has any of that.
Jesus. Let's watch that again. That was oddly satisfying. These poor Hoburgs.
You like watching short people get shot?
That's all that was. Just a lot of firepower.
Yeah, it is kind of cool that Tienchi's army has this much range power to it, yeah. Although he did cause some friendly fire on his Zots there.
Yeah. And probably on some of these horsemen. It's one of the problems of crossbow armies. Ooh. Loses 6 heavy horsemen.
6 heavy horsemen and 15 Zots.
Yeah. So, and fortunately for him, it wasn't enough to cause gem usage. He raids on top of this. Oh, no, just pings it with the scout.
Scout ping, yeah.
Oh, and no mages were supporting this, so he could have taken it.
Yeah, that's why I think that it's so valuable to do those, I guess you could call them aggressive pings, where you like send a force that actually could beat the PD if that's the only thing there.
Right.
Because then that fort would be besieged, and that would be great.
And strangely, he didn't ping this, which I think was like the thing you definitely want to ping to see what, if he patrolled.
And you want to see what's there.
Yeah, if we have a fight here next turn, which here's my guess. I think Erythia is going to patrol here. I think Tien Chi is going to move here. That's my guess. Because I don't think Tien Chi wants to fight this army. I think he wants to see what's going to happen. So I bet you he sends an army enough to cause gem bait here and sends this army this way. The Jedi move, I think, and this it's hard to know what the players will do, but if Erythia moves and patrols here and only has like a token force coming here and fights a battle, that would be smart as hell.
I think Erythia should march into Tienchi's army, maybe. Because he knows what's there now. I mean, the Tienchi has additional reinforcements, but Erythia can get a pretty good idea for what Tienchi's going to do, and Tienchi does not have the same information about Erythia. Like, he doesn't see everything, but he sees what gems are on the mages. So, like, if you open up that army where Tienchi just, wiped him, even though the gems weren't spent, you can still go look at the mages and see what gear and gems are on them, and get an idea for what, like, Tienchi's general script is going to be.
I do
so, for instance, we saw
rigor mortis.
We saw the temp gem item, actually, and boosters on one of those ancestor smiths. Yeah, that's the guy. So you've got a matrix thing. And so he also gave them
mortis or willing wins. This is certainly Aerofend.
Yeah, and he's using that armor, so that's both to protect against earthquake, and that's the armor that gives elemental resistances.
Right. He's putting that on the mages that have skull staffs mostly. Do they give?
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Trying to protect the skull staff investment. That's what I'm here to do. Legions of Steel and stuff. Nature Mage. I think the problem is that if he moves south, like the move I would probably make, it's hard to know, but if I did this move, I moved this army here and then moved this here to just this a sacrifice and to see what's here on top of. Oh, he moved these guys here so that if there was a second battle, he'd protect the mages. That's why this group moved here, because when the horses died, they would HP route and the mages would escape. He didn't want to lose the hero.
Right, and it also means that any sort of like anti-mage movement, like you were saying, in order to like just gonk those mages. It has to beat not only air elementals, but also air
Right.
elementals supporting these heavy horses.
Right, which would have been really hard. So I think the move I would make is take this army and basically with the throwaway air mage you have here, sacrifice him and the horses going on top of the capital, which will hopefully Jimbei defeat patrols. Take these guys and move here. If Erythia moves this way, it's kind of interesting because he's lost a lot of initiative by having these two forts put under siege.
You can put enough to patrol your capital to protect against the casual raid.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible.
Like, you can do both.
Yeah, for sure.
But I wouldn't predict Tien Chi moving onto either of the two forts with the entirety of the army, just because they don't know what Erythia can do to them.
Right.
But Erythia, having seen what Tien Chi does, it has the opportunity to move out.
Right.
And in Tien Chi's position, I don't know if I would be confident enough to go move onto a fort.
Yeah, because potentially you lose the game here. Right? If you move here and Erythia anticipates it and moves and patrols here, and he has the right tech to kill this army, which he's mostly scouted out, you're not out of the game, but you're gonna take a big ass beating for a while. Yeah.
And that's partly why I think that Erythia from here should take an aggressive stance. They should move into that army.
Okay. So it's gonna be pretty interesting to see the troop movements, and it's also gonna be interesting to see the main army fight. Possible we see it next turn. I kind of have a feeling it won't be for a turn or two more. I think you're right. I think Tien Chi wants to scout out exactly what Erythia can do.
And Tien Chi also built a lab there.
Right. So he may actually, I mean, he has the possibility to also do like a massive PD dump if he thinks Erythia is going to move out, do a full reinforce, and just be like, all right, let's fight it out.
We're getting to the stage where the province defense dumps are going to be much less effective.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. But, I mean, it probably would still help more than it hurts.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be the battle that determines the fate of the war, if TNG thinks they can win it, it would make sense for them to try it. But they don't really have like we were saying, they don't really have a ton of information, right? So it's really risky to, I mean, the nice thing about doing that is he could have all the mages sit here and research this turn, right? So that he's, if Erythia is moving around with his whole mage corps, TNG's like, oh, I'm just sitting here researching. But all that is secondary to who wins the fight, right? Because having your mages research doesn't matter if they all get killed.
So. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways that this could go. But the fact that he built a lab there, to me, that says that Tienchi wants to stay there this turn.
I think it was to refuel gems in case there was a
major battle.
A skirmish or
that actually that also tracks. That makes total sense too.
Because like this lab says is he wants to be aggressive. So what we know from Tienchi is he knows that maybe this war isn't favored for him anymore because he's at a research disadvantage. But because he's building this lab, what that tells me is he wants to fight still. Like even if it's the odds are against him a bit, he still wants to roll the dice. Maybe that's not true though.
Yeah, no, I mean having a forward base like that makes re-upping gems like much easier. If you're sieging a fort and you get gem baited and you don't have a nearby lab to re-up, that means you need to go step off the fort in order to restock. So having something next door like that might actually be, as you're saying, indicative of some optimism maybe.
Right.
Go keep pushing.
Okay, so I think that's this conflict. Let's come over and take a look at the world of Marignon. So last turn, like we were talking about, there was the attempt to HP route the Marinese army and cut off the retreat route, which didn't work.
Which mostly worked, but didn't get everything done that he wanted to, yeah.
And so this army is moved back out on top of the fort, staying aggressive, keeping the army penned inside.
And he also kept a fair number of royal guards in the neighboring fort. So that tells me that he's patrolling there as well.
Right.
So he's aware of what Gath can do, and he's taking countermeasures against it, while still trying to force the fight that he seems to think that he's likely to win.
Oh my God! And look at Marignon here, just eliminating the peanut gallery. This is like journalism, like genocide. It's called the Geneva Convention, people. Yeah. I was going to say, these devils here, they actually are really, really, really good for counter-thugging. They're like one of the best counter-thug troops there is.
Because they hit hard.
And they have that fatiguing hit, too. That's a magic weapon.
Hail. Yeah.
And that's actually if you're that's really hard to block all the damage from. Like casual poison resistance doesn't do enough to it. And they have the heat aura too, so
He didn't do that much counter raiding this turn, though.
well, got these guys.
Yeah, so he did patrol, but he didn't retake the
Right,
neighboring
right.
provinces from Pangea,
Right.
including his siege throne.
And devils jump in here. But these devils would be really great here, where you're trying to protect the retreat route from the army. So I would totally be on board with him sailing a few over here. It's so hard to thug once there's a few devils jumping in with your imps.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be a huge issue for Marignon to move them over there,
Right.
because they have those special Godic captains.
Oh yeah, let's take a look. Do they have undead leadership?
Yeah, they have this special guy called the Godic captain who specifically has undead leadership and sailing. His max sailing size is only 4, but that's good enough for devils.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. 20% blood random? Yeah, that's super cool. So yeah, that'd be the perfect guy to sail some over here. And just a few devils with 1 lifelong protection dude is going to cause a lot of trouble to thugs and super combatants.
Oh yeah, and lifelong protection also gives undead leadership, so you can just slap that on any of your sailing mages, and those can also bring some devils over.
So he's managed to kill some satyrs. That's not for nothing. He's taken this back, which is not for nothing either. This is just 1 PD. What the hell?
That's a lifelong protection assassin.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, so the other stuff there is just to prevent the assassin from getting shot.
Right.
And Marignon's assassins actually have sailing.
Oh, right. Yeah. So they can jump around this lake too, which is awesome. So, yeah, I mean, how big was this army? I feel like this army before was like 450 or something. It feels much smaller now.
So I think that part of that is that he split it up so that there's more guys patrolling there. Because there was a very budget patrol force there. So that's where part of them went. But also a fair number of those must have been lost in the retreat.
Yeah, that's
because
what
he
I
has
was
only
thinking.
one friendly province to retreat to.
Right.
And anyone that rolls to retreat across the river there will drown.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they fixed this, but there was a bug where even if you do control every single province surrounding it, if there's a river, they might try to retreat across the river and drown anyways.
I heard that they fixed that. So I don't know if that's actually true. Yeah, so
yeah, that's why I brought up that might have been fixed. I just remember that used to be the case.
So yeah, I think this army might be, the reason I mentioned this, I think this army might be small enough now where just 700 Gath troops are going to kill it. Especially,
well, it's going to come down a fair amount to the magic.
Right.
Like Gath is going to have Arrowfend on his side, which is going to make a huge difference given that the bulk of that army is crossbows.
Right.
But he also has to contend with the elemental spam, which Marignon showed he is not at all afraid to use en masse.
Right.
However, he does have an ally. So Pangea can potentially magic phase onto that and trigger gem spending before the main fight.
That's true. Yeah. That is not, and I don't know if they're in range of the, where's Pangea's capital?
It's further north.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idol can get here. So they could do an idol bullshit thing on this. Whether Pangea would or wouldn't, you know. They probably don't want to reveal they have an idol. They probably are assuming Vanheim doesn't know that yet. But
everyone knows they have an idol. You just have to look at their scales and the bless, and you know exactly what that is. We knew they had an idol on turn 1.
No, I mean, we did, but still, I think
2.
people always, I don't know. I'm always choosing to like believe people haven't figured out things they probably have. They haven't.
Given the caliber
Pangea
of this
hasn't
game,
felt they revealed it yet. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know,
Given
they
the
haven't
caliber
used
of this
yet.
game, I think everyone knows.
Yeah. So, yeah, they may use it on this. We'll get to see. That would be if they did the idol attack and then Pangea moved their main force in. That would probably
that would clean that up. Yeah, because a significant portion of the what I would call power budget of Marignon's army was those elementals.
Right. Right.
Oh, we should check to see how many gems they have because they spent a ton in that first battle, which the super combatant gem burned. So there is a question of how much they still have. Okay, well they still have some gems, but a lot fewer.
Hell. Yeah, a lot fewer.
Yeah. Oh wow, yeah, that's not even close.
Yeah, I think
you
this
might
army
have gems
gets
on
killed.
this.
I think Gath's gonna ride out this turn and kill it. That's my.
Yeah.
I'm calling it. I don't think there's gonna be a magic phase attack from Pan. I think Gath is just gonna ride out and kill it.
Yeah, and without having those air and water elementals, I think the Gath's army can actually handle that now. I think that army at its full strength probably could have handled Gath's army.
Right.
But that's before Gath having Arrowfend on his side, and while Marignon still had all those elementals, which he no longer seems to.
Right. Yeah, and Marignon probably has reinforcements they can move in from here too to maybe shrink this up. Like maybe this is a bait, get them to like ride out, and then they move in more mages or something. But, yeah.
The other thing which Marignon might try to do, now that they've seen Gath explicitly try to rout that army and cut their retreat paths, is move some or all of that force into some neighboring provinces. Maybe not quite like a full like starburst where you try to hit everything, but try to hit more of Gath's neighboring provinces.
Right.
So that I could see them moving even the entire army onto
This fort.
the throne.
Oh, that
Yeah.
one. This one has
Well,
higher
any of
siege
them, really.
strength. I like the idea. This has enough to one turn pop this. If you don't think Gath is going to ride out, I like the idea of leaving enough to keep the army trapped inside here and one turn popping it, and then you just get this fort back for free.
Yeah, and that also is a little cleaner in terms of retreat pathing
Right.
because you have access to more neighboring provinces.
I don't like this. Just reeks of desperation to me. Partially just because they are more desperate because they've had a lot of their army die and they've lost a lot of their gems and some of the mages probably died too. But also just this fort is so fucking big. They're hardly doing any siege damage to it and the army's inside. So it's like you're going to park your only army while you're kind of on the clock because you've been reduced to like a city-state size. You're parking your whole army on it and Gath gets to come out pinging you every turn when he decides he's ready. It's not a... You're not going to ever win a Dominions game with good players doing this. Not to say it's like I guess I kind of am saying it's a bad play. Like, don't take your army when you're all in like this and like in a desperate spot and just sit it here and say, come fight me when you're sure you can beat me.
Yeah. I do think that moving back onto that fort isn't the worst move because it gives you options to move elsewhere.
Right.
I think sitting there and staying there is bad.
Right.
But I think going onto that fort and then attacking one of the neighboring provinces can still potentially work out well.
Yeah. That's a better reframing. So it's not like this move is bad. Exactly. It would be cooler if he kept the fort locked down and maybe moved on something else this turn, save himself a turn. But sitting here, I think, is a bad play. So we'll see what he does.
And he also still has a very sizable force on his capital.
Right.
So now that Pangea is withdrawn, he should probably aim to retake some of that surrounding territory.
Right. Yeah. Pangea really doesn't have many troops up here. Like if these, if these groups combine, hey, maybe just the mages, right? These guys are going to Vanheim.
That's what I was saying. Is Pangea can't have?
Can't. Yeah, they can't. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah,
they're fighting Vanheim.
Right.
So yeah, Marignon is actually Marignon does need to do quite a lot of counter-raiding in order to take back that territory, but they can potentially grab back at least one of those forts which Pangea took from them.
Right. The other game that Marignon's playing is he's probably trying not to lose shit to Dryads. So that's probably one of the reasons he's going to keep armies patrolling in all of his recruitment centers is he doesn't want Dryads moving in and setting up camp. So
that's true.
It's gonna slightly decrease the amount he can actually roll out to fight.
On the other hand, he does have lifelong protection assassins, which can 1v1 the non-lifelong protection Dryads.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's this conflict. I don't think there's much more to say. Coming down to look at the Pangea Vanheim situation, do we have some pings here? Scouts being patrolled out. The temperature situation, next turn is going to be winter, and this will shift to cold 1. Oh, that's Gath. This will be heat 2. This will be cold 1. This will be neutral, and this will be cold 2. Yeah.
Well, potentially, because the Dominion scales from Pangea can also affect it more.
Right. That's true. Though we don't... Who's gunboat diplomacy? Who's that?
That's Pan.
Is that Pan? Okay, yeah. All right. So, yeah.
We don't know exactly what temperature those provinces are going to be.
Right, we don't. I'm just getting an update, because that's going to be an important factor in this war. Get a bunch of intel here. Not really. Some Vedi crossbowmen.
Reminds me of that 2nd century warlord series of posting that I really wanted to do weather-based tactics.
Yeah. Okay, so Zabalba, have they moved? Dear God.
No, they have not. The only thing that they've moved is their Ocelotl counter, which
Yeah.
has gone further up.
Yeah. It's like they're over here just manufacturing nuclear weapons, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, let's be busy with the other things." And meanwhile, it's like, "Rah." Don't mind us.
Xibalba's moved from playing SimCity to playing Factorio.
Right. Yeah. He's making rockets and nukes. Oh my goodness. Oh, interesting. So last turn, Arco was on the capital, and Jomon rode out with everything. And this is
And now you
literally
can see
all
how
of his mages. And this is a lot more mages than he had before. We've
now I
got
can see how many Sulfur Haze casters he had, because we've been commenting like he was talking about Sulfur Haze, but can he really
All
even
right.
spam it?
Let's do it. So here we go. Shugenja, no, 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 no.
He is R3 though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. No. Yes. So it's 1, 2.
And just 2.
2.
He can do some other evocation,
Right.
but yeah. And his god. But I don't think that might not
so
be what
3
his god
lets
is.
go. Yeah, his god
He's
looked
doing
like he was a
Rust
thug.
Mist. That's interesting.
He's probably off script, and maybe it's a lower path or something.
Possible, yeah. I guess that guy, the Earth Water guy, did have gems.
Setting his own horses on fire. Okay.
Didn't die though, so not the worst thing. Non-lethally setting his own horses on fire.
All right. So he's got control of his lake system, but didn't take this back. And this little squad of raptors. The raptors are gone, so it's just 10 hoplites on top of this fort.
That's the mercenary squad, so I don't
Right.
think that Arco uses them terribly.
Yeah. And the main army's moved down here where he's killed 12 shark warriors. Now it makes sense that he would have some shark warriors here. You know, he's probably thinking like, I want to cut off retreat routes for the army. That's the thought process from Jomon. But they're going to get butchered here. And he's still doing this bunch up thing, which, I mean, honestly, there aren't enough evocation things that look like they're evocation casters in Jomon's army that when I look at it, I don't think, like, if he didn't send me the message, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to get hit by evocations.
I do still think that when you have an army with this many mages, that it is worth setting up Evo bait.
Right.
And you've got 30 Cerulean warriors, so you can do it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, in this case though, because he dodged Jomon's army, he doesn't need it, right? Because he's only fighting mundane troops, for which that's actually detrimental, and you can like lose some of those Ceruleans for free. But now that he's seen Jomon's army, I think that he should actually, start considering that in his positioning.
Right. I think the interesting thing here is Arco seems to be kind of, obviously he's dodged it here. I think it makes sense for him to dodge it because he's got reinforcements coming and he's using all of Jomon's mage turns. So Jomon's not getting ahead in tech and Arco is. And before we know it, he's going to go dance over here and put this fort under siege while this one's under siege. And it's going to be like, okay, well, like, which do I try to defend? And then...
Yeah, and that's going to be Arco with yet more research over Jomon, who will have to go all in order to fight either of those armies.
Right.
That's a very good point.
The other thing that is kind of in the opposite direction is that Jomon is getting his first Ryujin, and we saw the first one show up here. But the Ryujin also potentially can make a major difference in how this war plays out, even without a tremendous amount more research for Jomon. So while it is kind of nice for Arco to just waste all of Jomon's research and have him run around chasing this army, he's going to have more Ryujin to deal with as the game goes on. So
yeah, and those guys are very fast, so they can deep strike into Arco's territory.
Right. And like this army is probably in the range of where 2 kitted Ryujin could kill it, is my guess.
I don't know. I mean, even kitted Ryujin, unless they have MR gear specifically, you don't want to go into Big Astral.
Well, it depends if these guys are soul slaying. Let's see if they communion up. Yeah, they're not. So, well, they did it at the end. Communion Master, Slave.
And the Sybil can also be S3 as a base.
So they might get Gifts of Heavens or something. I think there's a very good chance Ryujin could thug this army.
What's the Sybil pathing?
Oh.
The very bottom.
S2.
Oh, okay, yeah. She can't soul slay that. At least not out the gate.
So I mean, it's not tricky, it's not obvious, but when you put two Ryujin in the same tile and you have them buff each other, they are very, very scary. So they are the sort
Yeah,
of thing that could stack wipe this if without Soul Slay, you know.
yeah, you also can get a Foul Vapors thing with Ryujin.
Yep.
So like you basically stack them so that they buff each other. One of them puts up Foul Vapors, the other one just keeps casting more buffs. And nature also has great buff pass, right? Because
Right.
your water nature guy can also do Moss Body.
Yep.
So like you put an Earth one or an
Yep.
Earth random and a nature random in the same square, and then those two buff each other up and use Vapors to clear the army.
Yeah.
I prefer Acid Storm, but that's a little higher research. So yeah, a little harder.
So yeah, these are the types of things that Arco might be having to worry about if they don't put Jomon out of the game super soon. So whether we'll see them or not, that's a whole nother story. And I think that
because they do require both a lot of research and a lot of gem investment, and Jomon has been tiny, so he is very behind on research and probably doesn't have great gem income.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can do some pretty budget things like Lion Skin Pelt is probably enough to physical tank this, and like a bracer of protection. Maybe you need like an MR item or something. And I mean, you can do it actually with surprisingly budget gear, but you do need some gear. They can't really do it naked. So.
Yeah, and if you lose one or two of those, then suddenly you can no longer afford to replace them.
Right, right. So anyway, this will be interesting. Hopefully we get to see... Well, right now he literally only has one Ryujin. So his second one actually is going to be pretty important because these guys thug way harder when they come in pairs than as a single entity. So...
Yeah, but you also do need to hit the right randoms in order to make that work.
And what did he get here? I think it was Earth random. So that's one of the good thug randoms. Yeah, so it's Earth.
Yeah, that's Earth.
So that's good. Ideally, he'd get a nature for his next one, like you were saying, Sai. But who knows what he's going to get. So, okay. That covers that. We've covered Erythea. Let's take a look at Pythium and Agartha.
Yeah, so Pythium had already locked down both of Agartha's remaining forts. So Agartha is currently drawing 0 income. The bulk of Arco's remaining forces are in the southern fort.
Right.
That's at least where all of his summoning was, so we can presume that that's where most of his mages are as well.
Yeah. And there's now a really big army on top, 140 dudes. So that's a really big deal. He's got a smaller army of 8. Yeah. He's got a smaller army on top of this one of 80 dudes, and he's got a small squad up here counter-raiding or, retaking land from Agartha, while Agartha's stack runs around causing mischief. So yeah. Now Agartha isn't that actually at literal 0 income, because he does get some income from forts that are under siege, but he gets no income from any land outside the small bit you get from having a fort under siege.
Don't you go to straight 0 if all of your forts are under siege?
I don't think so, because forts give income when they're under siege.
Yeah, but I thought there was a special case of literally 100% of your forts were under siege.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I can check real quick.
Okay. Interestingly, I think we have a bump here, because there's a Pythium army right here that was going to be taking this province from Agartha, and it looks like Utgard has finally mustered up the gumption to ride out. And what we have... Okay, wait, that's the Agartha PD. We have Utgard riding into Pythium, and this is the first Scrotty thug we've seen. And Jesus Christos, this is a spooky dude. He's got a Flesh Eater, a Frost Brand, a Horror Helmet, Enchanted Ring Bell, some boots for reinvigoration, a Ring of the Warrior, and a Lifelong Protection. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and Scrotty are also just like very resilient folks just because of their innate regen.
Right.
So yeah.
That's a very scary thug.
With a Lifelong Protection, that's the word, where you're into like not quite super combat territory, but you are a luxury thug. That's the word.
A luxury thug. Yeah, that's a pretty good description, I think. Did you find out if that rule was true for sieging?
I'm checking it right now.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, he's taken this. I wonder if Utgard ends up taking more. I think it would make sense to at least try to negotiate with Pythium for some more land. Interestingly, the Garms have moved south. So the Garms were up here taking this province, and he's moved most of them south, which makes it look like he may go after Gath. And he actually might be able to take Gath if Gath wins this battle against Marignon decidedly and hardly loses anything, then this army will probably be able to regroup or like split, and he'll be able to send some of the forces back to take, to engage this Utgard army. But I think, to me, this says, well, no, you can't move through this because it's a winter pass. And they don't have, or a mountain pass, and it's winter. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Utgard's going to make a play now because this army's moving south.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what Utgard is
no, there were
planning on
trolls
doing.
here. Okay, so
And it's very hard. It's honestly a little harder for me to get a good gauge for what Utgard wants to do because I don't know how aggressive he wants to play, and he's been so passive for so long that like I don't want to like make any assumptions about what his macro goals are over like the next year.
Yeah. I thought that moving south was an indicator, but they're just killing trolls, so that actually doesn't mean anything. Okay, maybe he has some very specific tech he's going for, like a 7, and then he's going to try to roll somebody with it. Like maybe he just wants to get rigor mortis and go. I don't really know who they're going to work against. Maybe Arco, but maybe not. I think we've covered everybody now, and that means we're officially caught up. Did you get a chance to test it?
Doing it now because I had to remove all of my maps.
Okay. I'll go do it on mine real quick too.
Yeah. No, I had a little bonus for Agartha. Right. He'll at least continue to be drawing a trickle of income.
So I had it paused. I just turned you back on. So yeah, so you went and tested it, and you do get a trickle of income out of besieged forts. So he might not be losing units to desertion at quite the rate he would have if he was actually 0. But cool. What are your closing thoughts, Sai?
I mean, with the finals, that the way that they are, the wars that I'm most excited to see are Erythia and Tien Chi. I'm really curious to see what Erythia's big army is going to look like, given that we know that they're the research leader. So they're the ones that have the most variety in terms of what they can actually pull out. With Pythium cleaning up Agartha, I also really liked Pythium's little breakdown there at the end of how everyone's kind of fighting everyone. And then Xibalba is the other one, because that's the one free agent outside of Utgard who actually has a fair amount of research and weaponry to deploy in his big Ocelotl mass. I suspect that, just based on his position, it would make sense for him to go after Arco. But based on what we've been hearing in terms of like little rumblings, he's more likely to go on Erythia, which is a little bit challenging in terms of their border situation. Because he can hit the underwater stuff and he can hit that little peninsula, but then he and Tien Chi are kind of in the place where they kind of have to navigate through the same very small area in order to take the northern half of Erythia's empire. Assuming everything goes well, of course.
I think Tien Chi would probably be okay giving the northern half to Xibalba. What's interesting to me, I wonder if Xibalba is going to want these two to fight before they pull the trigger on anything. It's possible if Erythia wins like super decisively, that Xibalba switches into like vulturing Tien Chi. So he might be keeping that option open. But it's also possible if Erythia wins decisively, he lets this army get out of position invading Tien Chi, and then he goes through the back door, takes all of the Erythia stuff he can't defend. Because if you only have a mage corps, like if you don't have 300 units in an army, and like 100 or 200 or 300 Aussies show up with other flying support, your mages can't do anything. They might as well be militia. They're going to get mowed down turn 1.
And oftentimes the defense against that is, I can do turn 1 fire elementals or whatnot. But these are magic weapon resist buffed Ocelotls. Right. So they're not even vulnerable against like the one thing that a mage blob can do without troop support.
Right.
So yeah, if Erythia doesn't have his troops in position, Xibalba can absolutely make gains, even with Erythia having a massive research advantage.
Right.
The only thing that Erythia could do is like super combatant stuff.
Yep.
But that requires golems, basically. Like there's not really anything else like golems or
not even normal golems. It's really only Phoenix Pyre golems, and they're like 1 use a piece.
No, you can make a golem that works. Yeah, it's just very expensive.
Okay, I mean Aussies are really fucking hard to tank. If he has weapons of sharpness too, I think it's forget about it. Which we wouldn't expect from.
We know that he doesn't
at this
though.
point. Yeah, but I think even without it, I don't. It's really hard because the Aussies are going to have like 33 attack or something. I mean, 33 damage with lust on them or something.
Yeah, but you can do a round 1 moss body. So that plus slashing resistance. And then you can stack up to about, like, high 30s protection.
Is nobody going to cast Blessing here? Okay, thank you. 4 strength. Were there any Aussies here?
Well, I mean, from the 4 strength, you kind of know that
Yeah.
their actual strength, because it's +8 with Bloodlust.
Right. I just forgot what their base was. That's why I was
Base is 16. Yeah, it's 16.
Okay.
And they have bite and 2 claws. So the bite is 2 base, so 18 plus 8 is 26. And then the claws are 24
Yeah,
each.
you're right. That might be possible. But
I mean, yeah, no, like a mid-30s protection unit with Moss Body and slashing resistance can tank them no problem.
yeah, I think what I'm actually thinking of was a time I fought Squeako and he had literally 12 strength on his Aussies. It was
Aha, yes.
plus Bloodlust after that. I was like, okay, I can't. And my whole thing was like super combatants that game. I was playing Hinnom. I couldn't make it work. I'm a better player than I was then, so maybe it's possible now. But I just kind of like learned a lesson. It's like, can't do it.
Erythia can even potentially, like, depending on what gear they have access to, they can potentially even thug, like, lower tier summons or, like, lower hit point summons just by getting past that resistance threshold with, like, a Hecateride plus Earth Mage square.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, so I'm really interested to see what Zabalba does. I'm really interested to see the Pan. I feel like this is going to be this Pan Vanheim war. Like, I think a lot of times when people first join Dominions, they're looking for like these big battles with like big fireworks, and that might be what we get up here with like Marignon and Gath. But the real way champions are made is this like really weird, like efficiency trading thing that I have a feeling, I'm not sure, but I think Pangea and Vanheim are going to do, where it's a lot of small and medium engagements, and it's kind of like a bunch of mind games. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm looking forward out of that is that we have no idea what Vanheim is going to do.
Right.
Like, we have an idea of what Vanheim as a nation can do, but they're so versatile, and this Vanheim player has been adding to it with those adepts. There's just so many options. We can't even begin to guess what his armies are really going to look like.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, cool. So thank you so much for joining me, Sai.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting.
And viewers, those of you who made it to the end, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.